In a world where wealth can blind more than poverty ever could, one quiet act of kindness sparks a storm of truth. A black waitress working a quiet shift at an upscale cafe notices a blind girl left, waiting far too long by her powerful perfectionist mother. What begins as a simple gesture, hot chocolate and warmth, soon unravels a web of guilt-buried secrets and control. But this isn't just about power or privilege. It's about a girl's voice finally being heard, a mother forced to face what she's hidden, and a woman who refuses to be bought. This is the story of how one courageous heart didn't just help a child, but rewrote the legacy of an entire family. Stay with us to the end, because sometimes those the world overlooks are the ones who see the most clearly. The Velvet Leaf Cafe, nestled in the heart of downtown Chicago, shimmered with polished brass fixtures and the soft hum of classical music, a sanctuary of luxury where the elite came not just for tea but for status. Amidst the clinking of porcelain and murmured conversations, there was one table that remained untouched, table 11, tucked beside the tall arched window, where golden afternoon light spilled in, casting long shadows across the marble floor. At that table sat a girl no older than 10, her dark hair pulled into a neat braid, her posture unnaturally perfect for a child. She wore an ivory dress trimmed with lace and soft ballet flats. But what caught the eye were the small fidgeting hands brushing the surface of the table, searching gently but anxiously for something that wasn't there. Her eyes were hidden behind elegant sunglasses, and though she made no sound at first, anyone close enough could hear her lips whispering, "Mom, please come back soon. Please come back," over and over again, like a prayer stitched with fear. The atmosphere around her buzzed with discomfort. Waiters moved around her like she was a ghost. Guests stole glances, quickly turning away, as if making eye contact might offend someone. Because everyone knew whose child she was. Lena Moreau, daughter of the untouchable Evelyn Moreau, CEO of Moreau Wellness Group. A woman known in every boardroom, hospital, and media outlet across the country for her precision power and ruthless perfectionism. The staff had been warned countless times, do not touch table 11 unless instructed. Do not approach Lena unless Evelyn Moreau herself gave the word. Behind the polished tea counter, Amara Johnson, 26, watched the scene unfold with a stillness that burned. Her hands, dark and calloused from years of labor, paused in their cleaning. As she tracked the lonely figure at the table, Amara had grown up knowing what it meant to be invisible, both as a black woman in a city that only saw her when convenient, and as a sister raising a blind teenage brother after their parents had passed. She had seen children cry silently before. She had seen her brother tremble in waiting rooms when strangers forgot he had needs too. And now she was seeing it again, a child abandoned by circumstance and power, overlooked under the guise of formality. "Has anyone taken table 11? Yet she asked gently, her voice steady. Her manager, a man named Craig, who spent more time adjusting his tie than managing anything, didn't look up from his phone. "That's Ms. Moreau's daughter," he muttered. "We don't touch that table." "You want to keep your job? Johnson, don't be a hero." Amara's jaw tightened. She turned her head slowly toward Lena, just in time to see the girl's trembling hand knock over a crystal vase. Water spilled, the roses collapsed onto the pristine white cloth, and Lena gasped, blindly reaching for napkins with shaking fingers, her small voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." The room fell into a strained silence. Still no one moved. Amara did. Not out of recklessness, but out of something deeper, older, something that defied silence and status. She moved past the counter, past Craig's hissed warning, past the glares of customers who believed kindness was a disturbance. And with each step toward the frightened girl, Amara was no longer just a waitress on probation. She was a witness. She was the first person in that entire room to treat Lena not as a possession of power, but as a person in pain. Amara knelt beside the child, ignoring the way conversations paused and forks hovered midair, as if the entire cafe was holding its breath, uncertain whether to gasp or disapprove. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice dipping into a tender register reserved for fragile hearts. "Let's fix this together. All right?" Lena flinched at first as though startled by the kindness, then slowly tilted her head, trying to place the source of the voice. "Who are you?" the girl asked in a small, uncertain tone. "I'm Amara," she replied gently. "I work here, and I saw you might need a little help." For a moment, Lena said nothing, Then she whispered, I spilled the flowers. Mom's going to be so mad. Amara reached for a clean towel and began soaking up the water in slow, deliberate movements so as not to startle the child. You know what? Flowers fall all the time. Some of the most beautiful ones grow best in the mud. This table's just a little muddy now. She smiled, though Lena couldn't see it. It'll be our secret. A small smile tugged at Lena's lips, uncertain, but real. You're lying, she said with a trace of mischief. Grown-ups lie when they don't want you to feel bad. Amara paused, then let out a quiet laugh. You caught me, she said. Okay, there's a bit of a mess, but nothing we can't handle together. She gently guided Lena's hands toward the napkin and described the layout of the table. To your left is the glass. It's tipped a little. Right here's your plate, and here she placed a warm hand over Lena's. Is me, I'm right here. Lena's body relaxed visibly as though someone had finally stepped into her world, instead of demanding she navigate theirs. Are you going to get in trouble for helping me? She asked Amara, hesitated glancing toward the counter where Craig stood, fuming his phone now, lowered as he mouthed something she didn't care to read. Probably, she said truthfully, but some things matter more than rules. The girl tilted her face toward her. Like what? Amara looked at her. This tiny creature draped in silence and silk and said, like being human. The words settled between them like a pact. Amara then asked softly, Have you eaten anything since you got here? Lena shook her head. Mom said not to ask for anything until she gets back. And when was that? When the clock said 3, the girl replied. Amara glanced at the antique clock behind the counter. It was nearly 5. Something inside her coiled with quiet outrage. She stood and said gently, I'll be right back. Don't worry. Minutes later, she returned with a warm mug of hot chocolate, a grilled cheese sandwich cut into triangles, and a small plate of butter cookies, with sugar crystals glistening on top. She placed them carefully, explaining each item, like a guide painting the world in textures and aromas. Smell this? She said. It's like hugging a blanket, Lena giggled. You describe things differently. The others talk to me like I'm broken. You're not? Amara said, without hesitation. My little brother's blind too, and he taught me there's more than one way to see. For the first time since she'd sat down, Lena's shoulders uncurled. She sipped the hot chocolate, slowly savoring it like a sacred moment, and said between sips, I think I like you. Amara smiled. I like you too. Neither of them noticed the black Mercedes that had just pulled up to the curb outside, nor the shadow of a woman inside, watching them with a face carved from stone, her eyes fixed not on her daughter, but on the woman daring to reach her. Outside the cafe behind the tinted window of a sleek black Mercedes, Evelyn Moreau sat with the stillness of a woman used to being obeyed before she even spoke. Her posture was flawless, her tailored coat draped across her shoulders like armor, her manicured hands resting atop a crocodile leather clutch. But her eyes, those famously unreadable eyes, were fixed intently on the scene unfolding inside. She said nothing as she watched her daughter Lena laugh. Not just smile or respond politely, but laugh openly, softly like a child, allowed to forget the world's weight for a moment, and across from her, making her laugh, was the cafe waitress Black, young, unapologetically warm. This wasn't supposed to happen. Evelyn had left Lena alone for a reason. A test, she'd told herself it was about resilience, independence, perhaps even curiosity. But deep down, it was control. Who would approach the daughter of Evelyn Moreau without permission? Who would dare defy her unspoken rules? And yet this woman, Amara Johnson, had not only dared, she had connected. Would you like me to accompany you, ma'am? Her driver asked, glancing into the rearview mirror with well-practiced neutrality. No, Evelyn said, her voice quiet but cutting. Wait here. She opened the door, her heels clicking like judgment across the pavement. Inside the cafe, the moment Evelyn stepped through the doors, the air shifted. Craig, the manager, practically tripped over himself as he rushed toward her, apologies tumbling from his mouth like a waterfall. Ms. Moreau, we didn't know you'd returned. We tried to keep your table untouched. She walked right past him without acknowledgement. Eyes locked on her daughter and the woman sitting across from her. Amara didn't see her until the last second. She was mid-sentence describing how constellations could be felt through raised star charts when the presence behind her changed the atmosphere. Lena beamed. Mommy Amara turned slowly, rising to her feet as Evelyn approached like a storm cloaked in silk. "Amara Johnson," Evelyn said flatly, her voice a razor wrapped in velvet. Amara's spine stiffened. "Yes, ma'am, I see you took the liberty of feeding my daughter," Evelyn said, glancing at the empty cup, the half-eaten sandwich, and the crumbs of laughter still lingering in the air. "She was hungry," Amara answered evenly, "and scared." Evelyn opened her purse with the precision of a surgeon, pulling out a thin wallet and extracting a card. "How much do I owe you for the meal?" she asked coldly. Amara held her ground. "Nothing." It was on the house. For a moment the entire cafe fell silent. No clinking cups, no typing keyboards. Just that pause before a thunderclap. Evelyn looked at her daughter, then back at Amara. "Very well," she said, finally taking Lena's hand. "Let's go, honey." But as they turned to leave, Lena clung to Amara's sleeve for just a moment longer. "Can we come back tomorrow?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "You promised to teach me the difference between cappuccino and macchiato." By smell, Evelyn's jaw tightened. Craig, now ghostly pale, rushed over, the second they were gone. My office. Now, Amara didn't flinch. She already knew she was fired. What she didn't know was that outside, Evelyn Moreau was already typing a message to her personal assistant, her fingers gliding over the screen like a conductor commanding an orchestra. "Find everything you can on Amara Johnson. I want a full report on my desk by morning." In the world Evelyn ruled, nothing happened without purpose, and no kindness went unnoticed or unchecked. The rain arrived like a quiet betrayal, seeping through the cracks of Amara's apartment window as she sat in the dark, staring at the letter of termination lying next to a wrinkled eviction notice. The envelope was thin but heavy, like most bad news, and the ink smudged slightly where a drop from her still-wet hair had landed. Her apron soaked from the dash, home hung uselessly over the back of a worn chair. Her phone buzzed once, then again, then fell silent. She ignored it. There was nothing left to say. No paycheck, no severance, just a line about violating client protocol, and a reminder that the Velvet Leaf valued its high-profile patrons. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. She had been fired for helping a child left alone for 2 hours in a public space. A child terrified of spilling a vase of making noise, of doing anything that might invite her mother's wrath. Her brother's soft footsteps padded into the room. Jeremiah, now 16, walked with a practiced grace cane, tapping gently along the floor. "You're quiet," he said. "You only get quiet when something's gone wrong." Amara tried to speak but found her throat too tight. "I lost the job," she whispered finally, "because I gave a kid hot chocolate." Jeremiah tilted his head. She was blind. Amara nodded, and alone. Scared. I couldn't just walk past her. He smiled faintly, reaching for the old upright piano in the corner. Then maybe it wasn't a job worth keeping. The words were kind, but she heard the worry behind them, because they both knew what came next. No job meant no rent, no music lessons, no medication refills, no hope. A knock at the door startled them both. Amara froze, heart leaping to the worst conclusion, landlord debt collector. But when she opened it, a woman in a black suit stood under the hallway's flickering light, her umbrella dripping quietly. "Miss Johnson?" she asked. "I'm Margaret, legal assistant to Mrs. Evelyn Moreau. She requests your presence tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. at Moreau Tower." Amara blinked. Why I wasn't instructed to say. The woman handed her a sleek embossed envelope. No return address, just a time, a floor number, and a name that now pulsed in her chest like a challenge. Evelyn Moreau. Before she could ask another question, the woman turned and disappeared down the stairwell, her heels tapping like a clock ticking down. Amara closed the door slowly, the envelope trembling in her hand. What game was this? She had already been punished. Why now summon her to the lion's den? Jeremiah listened to her silence and said softly, "Maybe everything happens for a reason." Amara didn't answer. She didn't believe that. Not yet. But as she stared out into the night and the city lights flickered like distant stars, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had begun, something far bigger than losing a job, far deeper than a single act of kindness. And she was already caught in its storm. At exactly 8:57 a.m., Amara stood in the mirrored lobby of Moreau Tower, her thrift store dress clashing starkly against the backdrop of steel marble and designer suits. The receptionist didn't even look up. When she gave her name, she just waved her toward the elevator with the same practiced indifference used for package deliveries. As the elevator rose floor by floor, the city dropped away, but the knot in Amara's stomach only tightened. She didn't belong here. She didn't understand why she was summoned. She had nothing Evelyn Moreau could possibly want, unless it was to intimidate her, humiliate her, buy her silence. The elevator dinged on the 55th floor. The doors opened into a wide glass hallway, flooded with morning light and lined with abstract art that seemed cold and angry all at once. A silent assistant in a black blazer ushered Amara into a conference room so vast it felt more like a courtroom. At the far end, Evelyn Moreau stood with her back to the door, gazing out the floor-to-ceiling windows like a queen overlooking her empire. Without turning, she motioned to a chair. "Sit." Amara obeyed, silently studying the space around her. There were no personal photos, no clutter, just glass chrome and silence. Evelyn finally spoke. "Yesterday, you served my daughter when I had instructed otherwise." Her voice was even emotionless, but there was something charged beneath it, something electric and dangerous. Amara sat straighter. She was alone. For nearly 2 hours, Evelyn turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Do you know why I left her alone?" The question caught Amara off guard. "No, ma'am," to see who would notice her. Evelyn said, "It was an observation exercise. 17 employees passed that table. 6 customers. Her manager, not one, paused. Except you." Amara blinked, unsure if she was being praised or accused. "I wasn't conducting an experiment," she said. "She was scared. That was enough for me." Evelyn studied her in silence for a long moment. Then she gestured and her assistant stepped forward, placing a folder in front of Amara. Inside a check. The number on it made her breath catch more zeros than she'd ever seen. "Compensation for your termination. Consider the matter." Resolved, Amara didn't touch the check. "I don't want your money." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Not used to defiance, everyone has a price." "Not me," Amara replied, voice steady. "And using your blind daughter to test humanity. That's not brilliant, it's disgusting." For a split second, the corner of Evelyn's mouth twitched, not in anger, but in intrigue. No one spoke to her like this. No one had in years. "Interesting," she murmured. "Clara," she corrected herself. "Lena asked about you. She doesn't do that." She turned back to the window. "I have a different proposal." Another folder appeared. This one was heavier. "My daughter needs a companion, full-time. The salary is considerable." Amara opened it. Her throat tightened, 10 times what she made at the café. She looked up suspiciously. "Why me?" Evelyn's gaze sharpened. "Lena has a gift. She can hear lies. She said you were real." A third folder followed. This one wasn't about Lena. It was about Amara, her unfinished psychology degree, her 3 jobs, her brother's blindness, her mother's passing, her eviction notice. Evelyn knew everything. "How did you get this?" Amara asked, ice threading into her voice. Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't need to. "I know your brother's a pianist. A prodigy Horizon Academy would be a better fit than your current options." Amara stared at her. "That's emotional blackmail?" Evelyn's smile was cool. "This is business. I'm offering an opportunity for you. For him." Amara closed the folders and rose slowly. "You think you're in control of everything, don't you?" Evelyn said. Nothing but the answer was obvious. She was control personified, perfected, and weaponized. "I'll think about it," Amara said, her voice calm, despite the storm within. As she walked out of the room, her steps echoed in the glass hallway like quiet defiance. She didn't know what her answer would be yet, but she knew one thing. This wasn't just a job. It was an invitation into a world built on secrets where truth was currency and control was everything. And she wasn't walking in unarmed. The sun had barely begun to rise the next morning when Amara found herself standing in front of the iron-wrought gates of the Moreau estate, her reflection staring back at her from the polished black surface of the intercom. Behind those gates, past the trimmed hedges and whispering fountains, sat a mansion that looked more like a museum. Symmetrical, intimidating, and far too quiet. She hadn't meant to say yes. In truth, she still wasn't sure if she had. But sometime between Jeremiah's hopeful voice on the phone, Horizon called, "They want to schedule my audition." And the quiet midnight hour when she opened Evelyn's folder again. something inside her shifted. It wasn't surrender, it was resolved. If she stepped into Evelyn Moreau's world, it wouldn't be as a pawn. It would be as someone who watched, who listened, who remembered what real pain looked like behind designer smiles. The gates opened silently, and a staff member in a gray blazer greeted her like a concierge at a five-star hotel. "Ms. Johnson, welcome. Miss Moreau is in a meeting. Lena is waiting in the garden." Garden. The word was generous. The estate grounds sprawled like a private park, perfectly manicured, but strangely sterile, as if nothing grew unless allowed. Amara found Lena beneath a weeping willow, sitting cross-legged on a stone bench, a music box cradled in her lap. "You came back," Lena said, not looking up. "I heard your footsteps." "That's impressive," Amara said, smiling. "But I came to see if you'd still teach me how to tell cappuccino from macchiato." The girl grinned. "Deal?" They spent the next hour beneath the willow tree, tracing braille and star charts and comparing the textures of flower petals. Amara noticed how Lena stiffened whenever a shadow passed too quickly or a door closed too hard. She noticed the way staff barely spoke to her, as though afraid that too much affection might be punished. She also noticed how Lena bloomed under attention, the way a child only does when starved of it. Evelyn watched from a distance that afternoon, standing at her third-story window, expression unreadable. That night, Amara was given a guest room in the east wing, spacious, elegant, and windowless. It felt more like a chamber for observation than rest. On the desk was a handwritten schedule. Lena's lessons approved, conversation topics, meal preferences, rest hours, and limitations. Lena prefers soft classical music between 3 and 5 p.m. Avoid discussing her vision loss. Unapproved emotional triggers. Amara read it all, then crumpled it. She wouldn't treat Lena like a patient or a fragile porcelain doll. She would treat her like a child, one who deserved to laugh, to question, to live. But she also understood now. This job wasn't about companionship. It was about proximity. Evelyn hadn't hired her out of generosity. She had hired her to keep Lena contained, and Amara wasn't about to let that happen. Not without understanding why. Not without discovering what Evelyn Moreau was really hiding behind the locked rooms and perfect garden paths. She was inside now, and she wasn't leaving until she found the truth buried beneath the marble days at the Moreau estate, unfolded with eerie precision. Every breakfast timed to the second. Every corridor swept before anyone walked it. Every room infused with a silence that felt rehearsed. And yet, within this rigid order, Lena began to change. Her voice grew louder, her laughter more frequent, and her steps more confident as she followed Amara around the house by sound alone. They created secret games, naming plants by touch, counting footsteps between rooms, retelling constellations as bedtime stories. Amara quickly realized Lena wasn't just intelligent, she was brilliant, but she was also heartbreakingly careful. She flinched when voices rose, apologized for questions, and checked every sentence like it might be too much. The emotional bruises weren't visible, but Amara could feel them under every word. Evelyn, meanwhile, remained a ghostly presence. She was always nearby, hovering at thresholds, appearing at unexpected moments, watching without ever truly seeing. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her authority was the kind that bent air and rewrote rules simply by existing. One evening after Lena had fallen asleep, mid-story, Amara stayed behind in the child's room to tidy her books. As she slid a worn astronomy manual back onto the shelf, something caught her attention, a loose floorboard beneath the closet. Carefully, quietly, she pried it up and found a small wooden box scratched with age and care. Inside was a flash drive and a notebook. Not Lena's, Evelyn's. The initials embossed on the leather cover sent a jolt through Amara's chest. Suddenly, a whisper behind her. "Trevor helped me hide it." Amara turned sharply. Lena stood barefoot by the doorway, her voice calm but fragile. "It's Mom's diary. He said I should keep it safe, in case I ever wanted to know." "Know what?" Amara asked gently. Lena hesitated. "What really happened to me?" Amara knelt, placing her hands on the child's shoulders. "Do you want me to look?" Lena nodded once. That night, after Lena had fallen back asleep, Amara plugged the flash drive into her laptop. The screen came to life with photos. Lena with her eyes open, laughing beside a younger Evelyn who looked different, softer, real. Then came the headlines that had never seen the light of day. Moreau CEO involved in crash, child hospitalized private settlement, reach driver of second vehicle, unnamed. A single email dated 5 years ago pierced through it all. We buried the story, records sealed. The other driver accepted the payout, but Lena deserves to know what happened someday. Amara stared at the screen. Heart racing, Lena hadn't been born blind. Evelyn had been driving, distracted, guilty, and she had used her power not to heal, but to hide, to cover her mistakes with money and erase her own daughter's past. The next morning, Amara watched Evelyn leave for yet another mysterious meeting, claiming Lena would accompany her for foundation work. But something about her tone rang hollow. That day, Amara began packing more than just books and braille charts. She packed the truth, because the house that glittered with wealth was built on silence and silence. Amara knew too well was never where healing lived. Evelyn's words had been polished, rehearsed, and delivered with her usual precision. Lena and I are attending a private donor meeting for the foundation. We'll be home by evening. But something in her tone, too flat, too specific, struck a wrong chord in Amara's chest. That, and the way Evelyn gripped Lena's wrist just a bit too tightly as she guided her toward the waiting black car. The same car that had once sat outside the café like a shadow. Amara smiled, waved them off politely, and the moment the gate clicked shut, she went straight to Lena's room. Hidden beneath a drawer of scented scarves was the backpack Lena always took when traveling. Amara had slipped a tracking chip into one of its inner seams 2 days prior, not because she didn't trust Lena's mother, but precisely because she did. The signal pinged from a remote area far outside the city. Not a banquet hall or office tower. It was a medical facility tucked near the woods. Amara's heart pounded as she grabbed her coat. She didn't have a car, but she had a name. Trevor. Within the hour, she stood outside a modest townhouse lined with dying ivy, where Trevor Moreau, Evelyn's estranged brother, answered the door with a look that said he had been waiting for this moment far longer than she had. She took her there again, didn't she? He said, without even a hello. Every 6 months like clockwork, to prove Lena will never see again? Amara nodded. Why do this to her? Trevor's face twisted with sadness and something darker, grief mixed with guilt. Because she's terrified of what will happen if Lena regains her sight. Because the one thing Evelyn can't control is how her daughter might see her. If the blindness lifts on the drive through rain-slick back roads, Trevor filled in the rest. How Evelyn had funded hush-hush clinics to suppress Lena's medical options. How she'd hired specialists not to heal, but to confirm permanent damage even when it wasn't true. Guilt is her prison, he said quietly, but she's made Lena the one serving the sentence. As they arrived, the location confirmed their fears. Not a donor event, but a private clinic surrounded by trees. Its entrance shielded from the road like a secret waiting to stay buried. Through the window, they saw Evelyn standing beside a doctor voice, tight with control. Lena sat alone in an exam chair, her small hands folded in her lap, clearly confused. She repeats the same test every time, Trevor muttered, just to hear the same hopeless result. Except Lena's file says she has a chance, doesn't it? Amara said, eyes burning. It does, Trevor replied. 60% chance of partial restoration. But Evelyn won't allow it. Amara watched Lena turn toward the glass, her head tilting ever so slightly, as if she sensed something. Someone beyond the walls. We go in, Amara whispered. Now. The door wasn't locked. Evelyn's face went pale the moment she saw them. What are you doing here? She demanded, stepping forward like a general whose troops had been caught off guard. It's over, Trevor said simply, stepping past her and placing a folder on the counter. The emails, the sealed records, the blocked treatments. I've got it all, and I'm done protecting you. Evelyn's mouth opened, but no words came. And then from the exam chair, a small voice cut through the silence. I already knew. Mom, Lena said, her voice firm but soft. I heard you crying. I just never understood why you wouldn't let me try to see again. Evelyn staggered backward as if struck. Clara. She began, but her voice cracked. Lena rose from the chair and reached for her mother's face, tracing the lines with her fingers. I wouldn't hate you for the truth, she said quietly. But I hate that you lied. The doctor stood frozen. Amara stepped forward, took Lena's hand and asked, What do you want? Lena didn't hesitate. I want to try, and I want you with me. Amara nodded, her throat tight. And in that room, sterile, cold, buried in years of denial, the first real choice was finally made, not by Evelyn, but the girl had tried so hard to keep in the dark. The clinic smelled like bleach and quiet despair. But as Lena lay on the examination table, her small hand wrapped tightly around Amara's, the sterile walls seemed to pulse with something new. Hope. The doctor, once complicit in silence, now moved with cautious integrity, laying out the details of the experimental treatment as if reciting a confession. There's a 60% chance of partial recovery, he explained, voice low but honest. Not full vision, but outlines, colors, perhaps light sensitivity. Enough to change everything. Lena nodded. She didn't ask about pain or risk. She didn't ask for her mother's approval. Her only question was, how long until I know if it worked? Several weeks, the doctor replied. It will begin slowly, shadows then light, then maybe more. Evelyn stood in the corner, hollow-eyed and silent, her arms crossed as if holding herself together. She hadn't spoken since Lena's words cut through her armor like a blade. Amara led the girl out of the room afterward, her coat wrapped around Lena's shoulders. As they reached the car, Evelyn followed but slowly, like someone unsure whether they still had a place in their own story. That evening back at the Moreau estate, the silence was different. Not cold, not hostile, but full of uncertainty. Evelyn sat in the drawing room, no wine in her hand, no phone to her ear, just stillness. She asked for you, she said finally without looking up. Not me. You, Amara, remained standing, because I didn't lie to her. Evelyn nodded slowly. I thought I was protecting her, controlling the narrative, but in the end, I only made her afraid of the truth. You weren't protecting her, Amara said, not unkindly. You were protecting yourself from the guilt. Evelyn looked up, eyes red-rimmed but dry. I was a different person. Before the accident, I used to think perfection was strength, that power meant never apologizing, never exposing weakness. Amara stepped forward. But Lena doesn't need a perfect mother. She just needs you, the real you. Evelyn didn't reply, but something flickered in her eyes. A fracture, a beginning. In the days that followed, Lena's treatments continued. On the fourth morning, she woke up with tears streaming down her face and whispered, I saw light, Amara. It was blurry, but bright. Amara cried with her. Not because it meant victory, but because it meant choice. Lena's choice had finally mattered. Word spread quietly among the staff. And something in the house began to change. Evelyn no longer walked with the clipped authority of someone untouchable. She lingered at doorways. She stayed through Lena's therapy sessions. She sat quietly at the edge of piano rehearsals, where Jeremiah now played, filling the once silent halls with music. One night, as Lena and Jeremiah played a duet for the household staff, Evelyn turned to Amara and said, Did you know this would happen? That she'd heal, that I would change. Amara looked at her for a long time. I knew Lena deserved a chance, she said. As for you, I didn't know. But I hoped. Evelyn let out a breath that sounded like a release. Hope. That's what I forgot how to hold. And for the first time, she smiled. Not the polished, press-ready smile, but one with sorrow behind it, and sincerity. She was no longer a woman guarding her throne. She was a mother learning to kneel beside her child. And Amara knew the real healing had only just begun. Weeks passed like the slow thaw of winter, not dramatic but deliberate. And with each passing day, the Moreau estate, once a palace of glass and silence, breathed a little deeper. The staff, once rigid with fear, now smiled openly when Lana entered the room. Evelyn, whose presence used to freeze conversations mid-sentence, now listened more than she spoke. She was often found seated quietly beside her daughter during music lessons, not directing, not correcting, just present. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves danced in the estate garden, Amara sat on a bench watching Lena and Jeremiah trace patterns in the grass. Lena identifying textures with a new confidence, Jeremiah naming colors she could now partially distinguish. The tree is brown and orange, Lena exclaimed with wonder. I saw it. Just for a second, but I saw it. Evelyn approached slowly, a steaming cup of tea in her hand, and sat beside Amara. There was no preamble, no commanding posture, just a long pause and a breath that seemed to carry years of unspoken words. I used to believe legacy was about empires, she said softly. buildings, products, titles. But I was wrong. Legacy is people who we lift, who we break, and who we choose to become. When the power to do either is in our hands, Amara didn't speak. She let her listen to her own revelation. I want you to take over the foundation, Evelyn said suddenly, not as an employee, as a partner. Amara turned stunned. Partner 40%. Evelyn continued, full autonomy. A budget 5 times what it was before. You decide the programs, the outreach, the mission. Amara stared at her, unsure whether to be honored or suspicious. Why me? Evelyn's answer was quiet but firm. Because you saw my daughter when I only saw her condition. Because you see the truth where I once only saw control. And because you remind me that compassion isn't a commodity. It's a choice. There was no flattery in her tone, just a rare sincerity that cracked through years of cold strategy. Amara looked back toward the garden, where Lena's laughter echoed between the trees. I didn't do this for gratitude, she said. Evelyn nodded. That's why I'm offering it. The moment hung between them, 2 women from different worlds, bridged by one child's resilience and the truths too long buried. Amara reached for the folder Evelyn held out. Not because she needed the title, but because the world was full of other Lenas, other children lost in silence, waiting to be seen. And she now had the power to reach them, not as a waitress, not even as a savior, but as someone who had stood in the dark and chosen to carry light. The foundation would no longer be a publicity front. It would be a force, and Amara Johnson. The girl once fired for an act of kindness was about to change lives because she never stopped believing that truth is louder than fear and compassion is stronger than control. The day of the foundation's public reopening arrived beneath a sky painted with the soft pastels of late afternoon. For the first time in years, the Moreau estate opened its gates not to executives or investors, but to children and families navigating the world with visual impairments. The once sterile halls now pulsed with laughter, music, and warmth. Tables displayed Braille books and textured art. Jeremiah performed in the music room with students from Horizon Academy. And at the center of it all stood Lena, wearing dark-tinted glasses and a pale yellow dress, her fingers guiding guests through her sculpture exhibit, tactile pieces she'd made with clay and wire, each designed to be seen with hands, not eyes. This one's called Sun Without Shadows. She told a younger child, placing his palm gently over a swirling piece. Because I made it when I saw light for the first time in 5 years. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, but Lena stood steady. She was no longer the silent girl trembling at the edge of power. She was blooming in the space Amara had fought to give her. And Evelyn, she watched it all quietly from the back garden, a guest in her own story. You don't have to speak, Amara said gently, standing beside her. This moment belongs to Lena. But Evelyn shook her head. No, she said softly. It's time. A microphone had been prepared for donors, but Evelyn walked past the podium, stopping at the center of the courtyard, as guests began to quiet, sensing something unexpected. Years ago, she began her voice slow, but clear. I caused an accident that left my daughter blind. I was texting. I was driving. I was powerful enough to bury the headlines, but not the guilt. A stunned silence followed. Evelyn didn't flinch. For years, I tried to erase the truth, control the narrative, even suppress her treatments out of fear. Fear that if she saw the world again, she'd see who I really was. Gasps echoed. Some parents stepped closer. A few staff members froze mid-motion. But then, someone stepped into her darkness with kindness, not permission. Someone I tried to punish became the reason my daughter laughed again. That woman is Amara Johnson. All eyes turned toward Amara, who stood frozen, heart pounding. Evelyn continued, her voice cracking. She saw what I couldn't. She reminded me that redemption doesn't come from power, but from surrender. And today I give her this foundation. Not out of pity or debt, but because she is the only one who truly knows what vision means. She stepped back as Lena walked up to the microphone. Her small hand reached for Amara's, then lifted it. This, Lena said, smiling toward the crowd, is what it means to see someone. The applause didn't come immediately. It came after the silence, after the wait, after the reckoning. But when it came, it rolled like thunder. Evelyn wept quietly, not out of shame, but from the fragile birth of humility. And Amara, holding Lena's hand, knew that this wasn't the end of their journey. It was the beginning of a different legacy, one built not on perfection or wealth, but on truth healing and the courage to face what others hide. 6 months later, the Bennett, or rather the Moreau estate, felt like an entirely different place. The marble floors still shone, the grand piano still stood under the vaulted ceilings, and the roses in the garden still bloomed under the same meticulous care. But what had once been a house of silence now echoed with music, footsteps, and unrestrained joy. Lena's recovery hadn't been miraculous. It was steady sometimes, uncertain. On bright days she could distinguish outlines, shades, and movement. On difficult days she leaned on her memory, her hands, and the trust she'd built with the people around her. But one thing had become clear to everyone. Lena was no longer trapped in darkness, and she was no longer alone. Amara remained by her side, not as a caretaker, but as a mentor, a friend and a quiet warrior who had stepped into a battlefield no one else had dared to enter. The foundation, now renamed the Clara Light Project, had grown into something Evelyn could have never built alone. Under Amara's direction, it funded early screenings for children in underserved communities, sponsored scholarships for visually impaired youth, and built art and music therapy centers in 3 cities. Jeremiah, once a quiet boy practicing piano in a cramped apartment, now performed on stages across the country. His scholarship fully funded his talent, no longer hidden in shadows. He returned often, always starting each visit with the same words, "Thank you for not giving up." And Evelyn, she changed in ways even she hadn't expected, though she never completely shed her sharp edges. Her schedule now included therapy sessions, board meetings with social workers, and every single one of Lena's doctor visits. She no longer used silence as power, but as reflection. One warm spring morning, Clara handed her mother a small, wrapped canvas. Evelyn opened it slowly and stared. A painting, rough abstract, but full of feeling. A bright swirl of yellow and blue, surrounded by deep purple and textured streaks of black. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. Lena smiled. "It's how I see you now. Not perfect, not broken. Just real." Evelyn swallowed hard and held her daughter close. That night, as guests gathered for another fundraising gala, Amara stood beneath the willow tree, where it had all begun. She watched the garden lights flicker in Lena's slowly awakening eyes and smiled as the girl told a group of wide-eyed kids how she once learned to tell a cappuccino from a macchiato smell alone. "Do you regret anything?" Trevor asked beside her, hands in his pockets. Amara didn't answer immediately. She looked around the people, the laughter, the light. "Not a second," she said, "because sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness to unravel a lie, heal a child, and change an empire." And in that moment, she knew her story. Lena's story was no longer just about what had been broken. It was about everything that had been rebuilt, stronger, brighter, and this time built with hands that remembered what it meant to feel before they were ever allowed to see. Sometimes the smallest moments carry the deepest meaning. A cup of hot chocolate, a child's laugh, a truth finally spoken. Amara didn't set out to change a family, a foundation, or a legacy. She simply chose compassion when everyone else chose silence, and that one choice shattered a wall built on guilt, privilege, and control, replacing it with healing, truth, and human connection. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of kindness, or made you believe in second chances, don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever seen one act of compassion change everything? Like this video. If you believe every child deserves to be seen, subscribe to FlowStory for more real, emotional, and powerful stories that remind us what truly matters. Because here, every story has a heartbeat.